Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of Ambient Talkie, a show where we dive into some weird and wacky equipment and wonderful, call it whatever you want, music. I'm Andy from Two Round Robins, and I hope you're ready for a bit of plant music. So, as many of you will know, I like to use Flora quite a lot. Although I have never been able to get myself to fully understand the L system, due to the deepness of the script, I find myself rediscovering new, unpredictable things each time I boot it up. So I thought, since I had a lovely conversation with the script's creator, Jonathan Snyder, I might jump again into this lovely script, hopefully uncovering new and interesting things about sequencing the charming plants. So if you already played around in Flora or are completely new to it, do jump in, as this might help you demystify a few things. Now, before we jump in, let's try to understand the L system a bit. I know I have never really fully explained it, but this is partly to me not being an expert on the subject, and partly I need to do a proper read of Lindenmeyer's book, The Algorithmic Beauty of Plants, which does provide an overview of computer simulation of patterns that are found in nature. But to stay simple, the L system was developed by a Hungarian biologist, Astrid Lindenmeyer, who used the SAT system to describe the behavior of plant cells and its way of reproduction, which results in a natural pattern of fractals. So in its simplest form, the L system is a simple set of rules to draw or render more complex drawings. It's very much like a cell-type game where you throw a few rules at it, and if you stick to those rules, you create patterns that with each iteration might evolve into something that's a bit more complex. So for this example, let's just jump into a simulation of sorts where we can try to make something appealing. Okay, so welcome to this L system renderer, which I found off of GitHub, and hopefully, by me trying to explain a bit of the L system, how the L system works, will give you a bit of clue how you can incorporate the system into your basic use on the Flora script. So this is just so I can explain it a bit better. Now, like we said before, L system is a fairly simple system where you take a few symbols, you take an angle, and you take a rule set, and then you apply different iterations to that rule set. So, like in this example here, we have an axiom, which is just a fancy way of saying where we start, and we start with the symbol F, which in this case just means a line. So the rule here is fairly simple. It just means F equals F, and if we crank up the iterations, nothing is going to happen because more or less it's just going to stay there. However, if we add another symbol here, what you're going to see is that with each iteration, it just creates a longer line. So nothing spectacularly interesting here. However, the interesting parts start when you start using symbols such as pluses and minuses. So for example, now, if we use F plus F, let's see what happens. If we just use two iterations, or let's say one iteration, we can see that, let me just put in the length here a bit so we can see it a bit better. I'm gonna shoot with 30, let's say for now. We can see that it created a line, but it also then created a direction. In this case, a direction to the right, and then it created another line there. So like we said, and then if we would change this to a minus, for example, it's gonna change the direction, right? So that's pretty much, that's pretty easy, I think, just to understand. If we put another plus there, and now if we move the iterations, for example, to 2, you can see that it's just gonna double that rule, and now it's gonna triple that rule, it's gonna quadruple that rule, and we have a sort of a circle here. However, let's try to make something that's a bit more interesting than just a line here. Now, another thing in the L system that you can use and could be quite useful is basically using of the save position and recalling the position. Basically what that does, it's just gonna make a line, it's gonna make another line, and then it's just gonna jump back to where it was. So with this we can create something that's a fair more that might be a more interesting. So let's say for this example, what we can do is we can do, let's say, F, and then we're gonna use something like this, like a open bracket, which is gonna just say, hey, save this current position, and we're gonna continue from then onwards. So let's just try something fairly quick here. So let's say this, and then we're gonna recall the position, and we're gonna save the position again, and we're gonna use a plus symbol, so meaning it's gonna go to the right, and we're gonna, let's say, close that position. And if we take a look, what happened here is basically, so the rule started with an F, it went here, it kind of turned left, and then it basically moved back, and then it turned right. Now, if we crank up the iterations, we're gonna get this. So a lovely binary tree of sorts, and here we have what the code actually does. So because it just like quadrupled this simple rule and created something cool. Now the angle here, if we change the angle to 60, for example, because the angle changed, we have something that looks a bit to something from our chemistry class and stuff like that. So yeah, these can be quite useful just for understanding what this does. And of course, if we add, let's say, for example, stuff like this. So I just added a few lines within this code, and let's just turn down the iterations. We can see that we're getting a twig-like structure here, which just creates something a bit, more interesting and more akin to the natural world. Also, we can add new symbols. So let's say I just add a G as opposed to an F, but I still need to tell it what a G does. So G in this situation could be, let's say, an F minus, minus F. So it turns and then it turns again, and let's just see what happens. Okay, nothing spectacular, but opening it up can create something a bit more interesting. And let's just try to crank up the angles here. So I'm gonna go with 45 just to see. Oh, and we get a far more, angled lines here. Nothing spectacular, but yeah, it is something that that we can create, and it's basically a simple system where is a simple rule that you put here, and then messing up with this rule, you can create structures that have a natural pattern to them, and you can create something that's fairly unique. In this particular render, you have the examples here, like a binary tree, which we did before. We have a snowflake of sorts here, and just by looking at the rule set and the axiom, it just basically, you can see that it's something that's simple. It's something that's not that difficult, and it doesn't take a lot of code. It's just like, this is the creative way of how with little code you can create something that might be interesting. Now I'm gonna shut up here, and I'm gonna move myself back to the studio so I can tell you how we can use this particular system in the Flora script itself. So see you there. So just to clarify, I really am not an expert on the L systems, but it is a simple system that you can check out for yourself. I'll link the renderer and a couple of other videos explaining the system way better than I can, but for now I think we get the gist. Now, looking at the rules on Flora, it takes the same idea and principles but applies sound to the process as well. So by visiting the official documentation, we can see the rule sets. So let's say, for example, adding F will add a circle to the end of the plant, thus creating a note of sorts, while G will just draw a line without a corresponding sound, thus incorporating, let's say, a musical rest. Other symbols act the same, apart from a couple of ones which change the angle and tell the turtle to move in another direction. Oh, yeah, have I mentioned the turtle yet?
What's a turtle? Right, exactly.
I mean, apart
We're-
from
it's funny, we're sort of
animal,
going, we're sort of walking into the script backwards. Turtle is a concept of a drawing, of a part of a drawing program that does the actual drawing. And the idea is that you have a screen and you have a drawing that is going to occur. And let's say you are drawing a horizontal line going to the right. You can imagine a little turtle with a pen attached to it walking across your screen from left to right, and that would draw a segment. And then that turtle is going to sit there, and at some point you're going to say, okay, turtle, draw again going in the same direction, and the turtle will start walking and will draw another segment.
So now that we understand the L system a bit, let's just jump into Flora. So first things first, we boot up the system and we're greeted with 2 randomized plants at the get-go. So first things first is that I'm gonna go to the parameters menu and we're gonna change a few things here. First what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change to major and I'm gonna do D major and I'm gonna set the root. Now the thing that you're hearing here is actually Tinta, and I'm gonna talk about Tinta in a bit later, but for now if we turn it off we're not gonna hear anything, and that's interesting. So we're gonna ask ourselves, the bandsaw, which is the engine, what's gonna play? So I'm gonna go with plants plus Tinta, and because we have Tinta off, obviously we're basically hearing just the plants. And that's cool. Okay. Now, the things that we could do here is... Oh, a side note here. If you have installed Ambi Voices, you can incorporate those as well. However, for this example, we're just gonna stick to the internal engine of Flora. And now if we go down, we can see that we have Tinta enabled, which should be off because we have it off here. But the thing is that what we're gonna do is we're gonna load a very, very basic sequence. So it's very basic, and if we go here, we can see why. So it's just 2 lines, and that's it. Now let's start here. So meaning that let's start from scratch. So what we have here is a fairly simple thing. We have 2 plants on the first page, and we can change the plants by basically just holding K1 and moving the encoder one. So I'm gonna stick to this one for now. And one thing that you can do is if you hold K1 and move encoder 2, you can change the plants. So these are just like some presets of sorts. But for this example, because we want to start from scratch, I'm just going to use the most basic sequence here, which is this I12. And of course, by moving by pressing K3, you can go, you can increase the generations. So this means how much the rule sets, how many times the rule sets apply. In this case, we only have 1 time. But we're gonna change that, and we're gonna change that a bit later. Now, another thing that we can see is the angle. If I move encoder 3, we can change the angle. And by moving the angle, we get a new note, as you can hear. And this new note basically is quantized to that scale. So meaning if we move the amounts of the angle, we can change how the note plays. So let's have it now at, I don't know, angle number 45. Okay, cool thing. Now let's move to the next page, and this is rule set page. So this is where we're gonna do the whole simulation thing that we did before, but now inside Flora. So what we can do here is basically, and I'm just gonna maybe focus a bit more so it's a bit more in focus. There we go. I think this is a bit better. What we can do here is basically, so we have the predecessor, this is f. So this basically means f equals whatever this is. And we have a very simple rule here. We have a straight line with a note, and then by using the plus sign going with the documentations, it goes kind of counterclockwise. So it kind of moves there and it then creates another f. So it creates another line with a dot, so another note. Okay, but we can change this. So we can move here, and by holding K1, we can change this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create, again, a fairly simple rule. So I'm gonna use a left turn. I'm gonna add a symbol by pressing K3. I'm gonna choose an F here. There we go. F is chosen. And then I'm gonna basically recall that last thing with a closed bracket. And now we still have nothing because we didn't do anything. We just saved the position, and then, by closing, recall that position. But now when we go here, we can basically start messing around. So I'm just gonna add another forward line. So now we have 2. And then if I add here another save position, move it. I always fuck up with this one. And let's say we're gonna make a right turn this time, and we're gonna again change it to an F, so forward line. And then let's just, for the sake of it, let's just recall that position. So we have this, and we kind of closed it up within these brackets. And now if we go here, we have something that's fairly boring, but as soon as I open up the rule set, the structure changes and it becomes a bit more complex. And again, if we kind of move the angles, we get a more complex thing. Now, another thing that we can do here is maybe changing the second flower, the second plant. Okay, cool. So what we can do here is, again, go to a rule set, like here, and, hopefully it will work. So we're gonna make, let's say, for example, we're gonna create an open bracket. We're gonna change this to a minus, and maybe, let's see, maybe we're just gonna recall that position and then add a rest, and we can use G apart, as opposed to an F, to add a rest of that sort. So let's have it like this, and I'm just gonna add another open bracket, and this becomes a bit flimsy since it's not the best way. Maybe incorporating this at this part could be awesome. Jonathan, maybe do that. Oh, I'm sorry, maybe my audio is a bit off as well, but whatever. I'm just gonna speed run this, and let's see where this takes us. And let's just call the position, and going here, make it more complex. And we can observe this at the observe page here. So that's quite lovely. And maybe we can even zoom in, change the flower, zoom this in, and we have something that might be cool. Yeah. So now we're at the observe part here. Now what we can do is, if we move, we come to the plow area. And now the plow area is something that I never really take a lot of time with, but basically it's like an envelope of sorts that doesn't really take the usual ADSR type things when it comes to envelopes, but it uses node systems. So for example, what I like to do with most parts is just make one so it has a short attack of sorts and a long release, while the other, let's say we're just gonna change the attack. And we're gonna change maybe the angle. And we can hear that it's ever slightly so changing on the engine itself. Now, a new thing on 2.0 is that if you hold K1 and press K3, you come to the modulation probability. So basically what you can do here is you can crank up the probability percentage and the amount, and it will do slight modulations. And I do need to check this in the future, since I never really took my time with the plow engine here. But I am certain that you can do basic interesting things, and you can see that it's ever so slightly moving the angle of this plow here for plant number 2. Now, apart from that, what else do we have is that if we move here, we come to the water screen, and water is basically your amplitude of the plants, of the bandsaw engine, of your output, and also your node duration. So let's say if we change it, it basically speeds up your sequence, obviously, apart from this part here, right? So that could be quite cool. And then let's try to adding a longer duration for plant number 2. We can also add a bit of scalar, which is gonna jump a bit out of this scale that we have predefined in the beginning. And just by doing that, we can see that the complexity of the plants just kind of evolve, and I love that. Okay, so next thing that we can do is maybe, so we can add a bit of that, and note frequencies. Let's just keep it for 1 now. And this is something that I have to look into as well, is basically how this thing works. But I usually just look at the ratios, and if the ratios seem interesting enough, like this 4/9, it just creates a way lovelier rhythm within these plants. Now, the most lovely thing about the Flora version 2.0 is, at least for me, it's Tinta. So, what is Tinta? As Jonathan took inspiration from Arvo Pärt's compositional methods that are called Tintinabuli, and Arvo Pärt is an Estonian minimalist composer, and basically this is let's say a very lovely compositional method when you take a melody and let it run amok around the main part of the melody. So what I mean is, in very, very simple Tinta terms, Tinta will dance around your plants. And how does that work is basically if we go now here and we let Tinta loose, you hear those arpeggios just moving around. And even by going to the Tinta menu here, you can do a few different stuff. You can go so it dances around plant 1 plus plant 2. You can go with different methods. But let's for now use it a bit more simpler. Why? Because we're gonna code in what we want. And this is the live coding aspect of Flora, which I enjoy very much. And this is rather simple, for example, because the syntax that works on this is rather simple, and it kinda is inspired or connected to the sequence library which norns has. So for example, if we want to change the notes that are going around these arpeggiators, we can simply go type in tin equals s as in sequence, and then we can basically plug in our lovely semitones, and let's see what this gives us. We can hear the difference. Maybe we can do something simpler for now, so let's try 1/7. Let's just try 1/7 and let's see what happens. And as you can see, it just kind of goes between these two. But we can also recall the sequence that we put. Also, another thing that we can do is basically we can nest them in. So let's say, for example, we can go 1/5s and then, oh, maybe like this. Let me see. 1/7 and let's close it up. And now we nested the sequence within this. Ah, that's lovely. But let's try this for now. Ah, it's there. We can also, for example, try a bit of rhythm. So if we go with RHI equals S, and let's go with 1, and let's go with 2/5 and then back to 1. And now it's a bit more, you know, it's a bit, it's different, and I love that. Okay. We have rhythm here. We can also do octaves. So let's say, for example, we go octave equals S, and we go an octave above, return back, maybe go -1, and let's see, oopsie, and let's see what we could do. Ah, lovely. And as you can hear, it's much more complex now, but it's still quite lovely. We can also do off dance, which basically means it's not gonna be dependent on the plants. It's gonna go in its own way. But if we have on dance, it's gonna go back around the plants, and I think that's quite nice. So we have this. We can also see here, this is the envelope, which is moving, it's morphing. But we can stop that, I think, by just doing e-stop. And now we stop the envelope. We can do e-start again, and it should move. Yes, it's moving. So yeah, these are just a couple. It's very simple syntax, and it's very enjoyable because you can basically create far more complex things. And, you know, by going to the parameters, you still have a few other things that you can use. You can basically use effects like pitch shifting effects. And it just, it sounds so lovely. you can also use wow and flutter. You can amp that up. Ah, nice. And also, you can use generative sequences. So let's say for plant A, we can go with true and we can do randomize. And if we take a look at our plants, it's gonna randomize it. So let's try to... Wow. Okay, this is way complex now as it goes through the screen and everything. So yeah. You can also leave it a lot to randomization and stuff like that. So that's pretty lovely as well. So yeah, as you can see, Flora remains one of the deepest scripts on Norns platform. And with the addition of Tinta here, which you can stop by doing that, it adds so much more. So yeah, we barely touched the surface, but hopefully this gave some of you an idea how the L system is incorporated in this script, and hopefully it kind of encourages you to check it out yourself. If you want to hear how Flora came to be directly from the creator, be sure to check out the latest edition of In Canva With that I had with Jonathan. And also check out the documentation, because they're really well written, you can understand them, and so on. So I will also add, additional links in the description as well. So if you like this type of content, be sure to be sure to give it a like, give it a subscribe. And if you want to support me directly, there is a Patreon link in the description, where you can join and get exclusive content and sample libraries. But most importantly, do have a great rest of your evening, morning, afternoon, whenever you might be watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.
In the very long-winded way, I guess I'm asking the question, is the creative act, in some sense, a fundamentally chaotic act?